The Falcons defense just got a little sweeter.
The Eagles win 14-13 on Thursday night against the New England Patriots in the preseason.
We now know that Russell Wilson is set to start for the Pittsburgh Steelers on their Saturday night game.
Some big news came out of Chargers training camp on Thursday, and it was nothing that happened on the field.
The Atlanta Falcons made a pair of moves to improve their defense this week.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
The Eagles win 14-13 on Thursday night against the New England Patriots in the preseason.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast.
But if you're an Eagles fan, you knew that this was much more than just another preseason game. You understood that there were multiple players that were coming into tonight that could potentially win or lose themselves a job. So let's just talk about it in sequential order of how things happened. Before the game even starts, it's clear that Mekhi Becton is the winner of the right guard battle. He didn't even play tonight. Tyler Steen, he ended up playing, not to his benefit though. It was unfortunate. He goes out there and he gets carted off. It seems like that ankle injury has just been continuing to linger. He goes out there, battles it out after what looks like he lost the job to Mekhi Becton, seeing that he was the one to go out there and get the quote-unquote first team right guard minutes. Mekhi Becton didn't even have to play. Unfortunately, now you're wondering who is that next guy up at the right guard position if Tyler Steen is out for any extended period of time. Fingers crossed, hopefully he does come back relatively quickly, but getting carted to the locker room after walking off on his own power, it's not great to see. But it looks like the Eagles are going to go with a starting combination of Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens. At right tackle will be Lane Johnson. And man, if you were to ask me or Lou before this preseason started, if Mekhi Becton had any chance to win the right guard job, we would have said you were probably crazy. He's more than likely going to be your swing tackle. Well, congratulations to Mekhi Becton. He goes out there. He wins himself a job. Also, Tyler Steen, it is important. He is your sixth man on this offensive line. He needs to come back healthy because they're just one injury away from him being the next guy to go. And if not, we'll talk about the offensive line depth concerns. They need him in a big way. Now let's move to the defensive side of the ball. The big question, who are going to be the guys on the outside at cornerback? Right away, the starters, it was Kelee Ringo, it was Isaiah Rodgers, and then at the nickel cornerback position, it was Quinyon Mitchell. I thought one player out of that group separated themselves tonight. Quinyon Mitchell, I think, has solidified himself as the starting nickel corner, but the big job up for grabs was the player that's going to start opposite of Darius Slay. In my opinion, I think in the opinion of a lot of people as well that watch this game tonight, Kelee Ringo and the decision, it is leaning 22's direction. He looks bigger. He looks fast. He looks athletic. He understands where the ball is in the air. It looks like he continues to make plays on the football, getting his hands to the ball. Outside of one play tonight where Drake May made a heck of a throw, putting it in the basket of Javon Baker, who by a yard and a half or so cooked Kelee Ringo downfield. Kelee Ringo has done a very good job of maneuvering from the line of scrimmage as a press cover corner and really bullying these undersized wide receivers. And that's funny to say because Kelee Ringo, one of the questions about him was, can he put on this mask to be a full-time starter outside? Well, man, you just look at him and he looks the part. He looks like he's put on the muscle. You see him when he's in these one-on-one situations off the line of scrimmage. He's able to really jam and misguide these guys off of their initial line. He did that at multiple points tonight where he's pushing these guys to the sideline, making it nearly impossible for him to get stacked and then get into his blind side and then potentially push past him. He's done a very good job in these last 2 games of solidifying himself, in my opinion, as that guy opposite of Darius Slay. Now, is that because Isaiah Rodgers has looked poor? Not at all. I thought they've gone blow for blow at times, but I thought Kelee Ringo, he started to land some more of those power shots, some more of the ones that you're going to look at the scorecard if this thing does go to a decision and say, okay, Kelee put in those reps that you might feel a little bit more confident than Isaiah Rodgers, who's maybe a little undersized compared to Kelee Ringo. Maybe he's a little more rusty being off the field for over a complete year at this point. But you're in a good situation at the cornerback position. And I think you're in a good position in the defensive back room all in all, because you might have found your answer to that next guy up at safety, Avonte Maddox. Maybe the biggest play of the day. You win 14-13. He picks the ball off on the first offensive possession where New England, actually, I believe it was the second offensive possession for New England, where they're pushing the ball down the field. They're in the red zone. They're playing man match coverage where there's no over-the-top safety help. Avonte Maddox, he does get turned around at a point, but he's able to come back to the football against a bigger bodied wide receiver and make an interception. And he's about 1 or 2 blocks away from returning this thing to the house. And in a game where James Bradbury, he had his moments at safety, but he had more moments where he was lost on the football field, i.e. the Drake May read option where James Bradbury didn't know that the ball was even in the end zone until he probably walked off the field. Avonte Maddox, though, without Sidney Brown back there, you should feel pretty confident that Avonte has had experience at safety in his rookie season going back all those years ago. He was willing to step up and make this position change because right now at corner, you got too many guys. Avonte Maddox, hats off to him. I thought him, Kelee Ringo, you look at potentially Tanner McKee. Tanner McKee, why is he not getting second team reps? We said it all week long. Lou and I have been pushing the pace for this guy. He just looks the part. Anybody with eyes can tell you that he is a better quarterback right now than Kenny Pickett. Did Kenny Pickett look terrible? No, I don't think he looked terrible at all. He did enough for you to go out there and control the game and not put the ball in a precarious position. But is that enough to evaluate some of these guys like the Joseph Ngatas of the world and the Austin Watkins Juniors, who towards the end of the game, they started to answer some of these questions, which we're going to talk about in the next segment. But Tanner McKee, this race might have went from Kenny Pickett is your quarterback 2 to Kenny Pickett might have to win the quarterback 2 job going into the 3rd preseason game. But a lot of good out of this Eagles team tonight in a game where they needed to score late, put together some drives towards the end of the game to squeak this thing out, but points don't matter in the preseason. Getting good evaluation of this team definitely is, and we'll continue to talk more about it as we evaluate the All-22 and go back for the rewatch. But first things first, man, you look at some of these guys who won jobs tonight. Mekhi Becton, ding, ding, ding. He's your starting right guard. In my opinion, Kelee Ringo, ding, ding, ding. He's your CB2. You look at some of these other positions, depth at safety, Avonte Maddox, he might have won himself a job tonight. Patrick Johnson might have solidified himself a roster spot tonight. A lot of good.
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, WNBA back soon, there's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. Is there any point in betting on anyone in the AFC West besides the Chiefs? FanDuel has the Chiefs -230 to win the AFC West. If you want to bet on another team in that division, the Chargers are the next closest to the Chiefs at +350. The Raiders They're 9-1, and the Broncos, well, they're just happy to be here. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
The Falcons defense just got a little sweeter.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast.
Officially on Thursday afternoon, the Falcons signed former Denver Broncos safety Justin Simmons to a one-year contract worth $8 million with $7.5 million guaranteed, according to NFL Network. Falcons are getting a two-time Pro Bowler, four-time All-Pro, second-team All-Pro. I know some people don't count it when it's second team, but they're getting one of the top safeties in the NFL for the last 5 years. And complacency is seemingly no longer an issue. It's been a busy 24 hours. Actually, I think it's a little more than exactly 21 hours between the Matt Judon trade and the signing of Justin Simmons officially. And those are two big pieces to this Falcons defense. I'm personally upset. The reason why I'm not sitting here, overjoyed, guys, because I would have loved to have given you this content way back in March. But alas, I have to wait till August. I can't get my month straight to give you this content. But as they say, better late than never when it comes to the Falcons defense. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Justin Simmons, in his game, right? Superb ball skills, superb instincts, a playmaker on the back end, so similar to Jesse Bates. 30 interceptions for Justin Simmons since entering the NFL in 2016. It's the most of any player. Unfortunately for Justin Simmons, he hasn't been able to turn his individual success into overall team success in Denver, as he has not made the playoffs, and hopefully he will break that streak here in Atlanta. We're all hoping for that because the Falcons, it's been a while since we made the playoffs. But basically, when Earl Thomas sort of took the league by storm, almost 15 years ago, everybody for basically the next decade was looking for the next Earl Thomas. And Justin Simmons is arguably the player that's come closest to Earl Thomas in that period of time. That's how good he has been at various points in Denver. You love the fit in this scheme in Atlanta. We had Cody Alexander of matchquarters.com back on the podcast back at the end of May, I think, talking about Raheem Morris's scheme. And he talked about in that episode how Ejiro Evero, the current Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator, has a very similar scheme, having coached with Raheem in LA. And Simmons played for Ejiro Evero in 2022 with the Denver Broncos when he was the then Broncos defensive coordinator. And that season, Simmons tied for the NFL lead with 6 interceptions. So if that translates, you kind of know what you're getting. We just saw Jesse Bates coming off a 6 interception season. Hopefully, we'll get Cody back on the podcast soon to get a little bit more insights into what this scheme looks like with adding playmakers like Judon and Simmons into the mix. But I'm imagining when we have that conversation with Cody, he's going to talk about, the possibilities of having 2 instinctual ball hawking corners on the back end, like Simmons, like Bates, that are going to do wonders for this defense. 2 guys that are going to be able to take the ball away. And now that you couple that with a team that can now get more reliable pressure with 4 guys with the addition of Judon, that's the makings of a high-end defense. And earlier this summer, we have been talking quite a bit about how this Falcons defense ceiling is probably like the 18th best defense in the NFL, and their floor is probably the 28th best defense in the NFL. And there's a question on where they would kind of fall in that range. And now I feel like, that's sort of flipped, right? Before the last 24 hours, when people were trying to hype up this defense is capable of much more than, being the 18th best defense, I was calling the cops on these people. I was like, these people need to be drug tested. They should not be out on the streets giving these terrible takes about the Falcons defense. But I'm putting the phone down, right? I'm not calling 911 anymore on these people. I'm not trying to get these people locked up for, being high at work and whatnot. With these defensive takes. And, I don't know exactly what the range is for this defense now, but it feels like 18 is the floor now with these 2 additions of Judon and Simmons. And that ceiling could, potentially be 8 or somewhere in the top 10. I know Jarvis later in today's episode will talk about those expectations for top 10. And it's kind of like, in his eyes, like anything else is unacceptable. I don't know if I've gotten to that point now, just get me in the top 15. That'll be a first in Atlanta in a very long time, if you ask me. But, when we talk about the ways that we judge defense, right, we talks about how the 2023 Falcons were good in 3 out of the 6 areas that we judge defense on, right? Stopping the run, third down defense, red zone efficiency, right? Those were the 3 areas where the Falcons were like top 5 last year in 2023. And a big reason why that defense was so stable and so consistent last year and consistently allowed the Falcons to be in games, basically, keeping offenses off schedule and getting off the field in critical moments. But that defense was also lacking in the 3 areas that are also part of, measuring defense, which is putting pressure on the quarterback, creating turnovers, and limiting explosive plays. And it feels like these 2 moves of Judon and Simmons are now going to really elevate them in those 3 areas that were major question marks, right? And now it's just really a question of, can you now maintain in the 3 areas that you were really good at last year? And for obvious reasons, we're hoping the answer to that question is yes. So I think there's a lot of upside to this defense based off of the moves they made in the last 24 hours. It's an incredible achievement. I've talked a lot of trash about Raheem and Terry's questionable plan for this defense and this team over the last 5 months, but they've done an incredible job over the last week. And I said before that, the Falcons felt like an 8 or 9 win team just a few days ago. And I feel like these 2 moves really elevate their ceiling. Double-digit wins definitely feels way more realistic to me today than it did 48 hours ago. Before 48 hours ago, it felt like you needed the offense to absolutely carry this football team. And I think I said this yesterday on one of the 2 shows we put out, not talking about Matthew Judon trade, but talking about the offense and the explosiveness, that, that wasn't a great bet given that the offense may not necessarily hit the ground running. But now with these defensive additions, you really have a chance to start slowing down some of those opposing offenses at the beginning of the season that you're going to face, some of them high caliber ones, so that your offense does have a little bit more margin for error, that if they don't come out firing and clicking and firing on all cylinders, come week 1, come week 2, week 3, you do have a lot more margin for error. And I'm looking at a team like Kansas City right now. Like before, it was like you had no chance of stopping that Kansas City offense. And Kansas City is the measuring stick. We know that they're the Super Bowl favorites. And now you can legitimately say, hey, we got a shot against Kansas City, when I don't think you could have said that before, right? That it felt like Terry and Raheem's plan all offseason was like, let's just be the best team in a bad division, right? It wasn't really trying to be a complete or good team, before. And now it is. Now it feels like this team is actually trying to be a good team. That is not just a team that can win the NFC South because it's the worst division in football, but is a team that could go in other divisions and legitimately challenge for division crowns in quote unquote real divisions elsewhere in the NFL. So that's what I mean, where it's been an incredible sort of turnaround for this football team. And I know a lot of other people say you never had any doubts. And I'm just like, I don't know how you are a Falcon fan if you didn't have doubts, but hey, to each their own. There are some people out there in the world that are much more optimistic, despite it all. Every reason to be not so much when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons. So, maybe we're turning a new page. Maybe we're going to have to be a lot more optimistic on this podcast moving forward because of things like this. But before we get into Jarvis's thoughts, I do want to touch upon a little bit of the financials with Justin Simmons. It was reported early on Thursday that Chris Lindstrom is restructuring his contract, freeing up to $9 million in cap space. The Falcons already had about $3 million cap space. Now that puts them at 12. They needed about 6.5 to acquire Judon in the trade. They're reportedly going to wait on a contract for him, so we'll see how that goes in the future. My guess is with the Simmons deal that they're going to tack on some void years on that contract, so they don't have to absorb the entire $8 million in 2024, this upcoming season. And for those of you not familiar what void years are, basically years that you tack on the end of the contract that you can basically spread bonus over, but they don't necessarily count towards the contract, right? So for example, if part of Justin Simmons' deal is to get a $6 million signing bonus, right? On a standard 1-year deal, you have to take on that $6 million all in this first year. But if you were to tack on 2 void years on top of this 1 year, you could spread that $6 million over 3 years. So instead, you would only take on $2 million this year, right? Saving you $4 million against the cap. And then the remaining counts as dead money in the future.
The Atlanta Falcons made a pair of moves to improve their defense this week.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast.
The Atlanta Falcons, Lauren, have been busy typically this time of year, you don't see teams make major roster moves unless they've had other major roster issues, as in injuries. Usually you see a guy go out or maybe a holdout happens, and so a move is made. The Atlanta Falcons, not only Eve exactly, but just a short time before they make their second preseason debut of the year, have gone out and gotten themselves a pair of defenders. We're going to start off with the first defender that they added to their roster, which was former Patriots pass rusher Matt Judon. What do you think of the deal there for the Patriots sending Judon to the Falcons? They're going to get a 2025 third-round pick, according to Ian Rappaport, and the Falcons get Judon. So he's set to make $6.5 million this year. And of course, the thought process, right, is that they're going to pay him. So what do you think of that situation?
Yeah, it's not often that a team gets to add 2 Pro Bowl players in 24 hours with Judon and Justin Simmons there. But yeah, with Judon, he was interesting because we all knew he was available, that, the Patriots were likely going to send him somewhere, and it was just a matter of time and getting the right offer. And then it comes down to the Falcons, and it sounds like the Chicago Bears were the last 2 teams at the top of the pyramid here. And so it's been something I've been talking about a lot on my podcast, where it's like he's a 32-year-old pass rusher who's coming off of a season-ending bicep injury. And so it's not necessarily someone you're eager to have to invest a super, super long-term contract in, but he's a guy who's had 12.5 and 15.5 sacks the last 2 seasons he was fully healthy, and been 4 straight years as a Pro Bowler. Like, that's the kind of move that can take a team like the Atlanta Falcons that's really in a pretty tight Super Bowl window that they're going after with Kirk Cousins, to say, we don't need to worry about what he's going to be for us 3 or 4 years from now. Let's just get 1 or 2 really good years out of him to bolster this pass rush and really solve a position that, I don't know if it was like a humongous weakness for the Falcons, but definitely an area where they could use an upgrade like this and kind of move everyone down the depth chart a little bit more. Much like the Bears are in the same spot with Montez Sweat, the Falcons are there with Lorenzo Carter. Like, get somebody to pair with him on the opposite side, and it's going to have a ripple effect across that defense. So it makes a lot of sense for them.
Yeah, I think it made a lot of sense too. And happy birthday to Matt Judon. Actually, on the day that we're recording, we're being recorded on Thursday. It's our Friday episode, but Thursday is his birthday, so he's officially 32 years old today. And the fact that is considered old, and I'm 10 years older, is sad, but that's okay. But like you said, Matt Judon, 32 years old, right, joining the Falcons, and this is, just like you kind of mentioned, the perfect move for a team like the Atlanta Falcons to make, because they're not talking about a window that they're looking to extend and keep open for 10 years. And, they love to do that. But first things first is you got to get the window open, right? And in order to do that, you got to have the playmakers. And obviously, a team that goes after Kirk Cousins is not necessarily looking 5, 6, 7 years down the road. So Matt Judon fits that mold perfectly, coming from the Baltimore Ravens before he went to the New England Patriots, multiple Pro Bowl seasons. So obviously, they're going to look to tap into that, and hoping that they got him relatively on the cheap. I mean, that third-round pick, that could certainly turn into a key player for 4 years or more, depending on how contracts and all that stuff work. So perhaps the Patriots will end up 7 years from now saying, oh, man, that was a great trade for us. But the Falcons are kind of hoping that they're going to be able to say that was a great trade for them here this season and then moving forward. And then another deal they're hoping is going to be looked back on very fondly is the 1-year, $8 million contract that they agreed to with Justin Simmons, who a lot of people were, well, I don't say a lot of people, some people were surprised that he was still available at this point. However, he and his representatives have made it known that he had gotten some conversations and some offers and some interest from other people, but he was kind of taking his time and wasn't really in a huge rush and all that stuff. ESPN did a poll of NFL executive scouts and coaches, and Justin Simmons still made the list as one of the top safeties in the NFL, despite the fact that he was still available as a free agent post-training camp, where typically you don't have a lot of people who are that good a quality available. So Justin Simmons, no spring chicken himself, right? He's 30 years old, turns 31 in November. So again, kind of fits that mold. But Lauren, what do you think of Justin Simmons going to Atlanta?
Yeah, it's an interesting mix. I mean, he's a great player, and I mean, he just made the Pro Bowl literally this past season. So there's not like Judon had a little bit of the injury concern as like, okay, he's 32 and he's injured. So is he going to get back to being a 15 sack guy right away, or are we at the beginning of his decline? But like Justin Simmons had 3 picks last season. Maybe it wasn't, the 6 that he had a couple of years ago, but like he's still playing football at a really, really high level. I'm just interested how they end up couching it scheme wise with him and Jesse Bates. Like those are both guys that if I'm trying to utilize their skill sets to their best ability, like I want them playing deep. But you can't play two deep safeties all the time. You can do it quite a bit, but like one or both of those guys is going to have to play up in the box, maybe a little bit more than you'd like to. I think they're both capable up in the box and covering the slot, but it's more about like, are you getting the best out of both players when one of them has to be up closer to line of scrimmage and can't be roaming the back end at all times? But at the same time, if I'm Atlanta, like that's a good problem to have, and I'll figure it out later how to really squeeze the most out of them. And I'll say that, hey, this is a nice upgrade for me at the safety position.
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying, you can never have too many pass rushers, right? Well, I would think that obviously Raheem Morris and the Atlanta Falcons feel like you can't have too many pass defenders either, especially in a division where you got Mike Evans, you got Chris Godwin that you got to beat or try to beat twice per year.
GameTime makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. GameTime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the GameTime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code LOCKEDON. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase with GameTime. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
We now know that Russell Wilson is set to start for the Pittsburgh Steelers on their Saturday night game.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast.
We did get officially confirmed from Mike Tomlin that Russell Wilson will start the game against the Bills at quarterback for the Steelers. And it feels like this took a very long time to see. I think I've talked about it with other people. I wanted to get your thoughts too on this. I thought that we were going to see, like when Russell Wilson's calf injury was told to us, like after the conditioning drill, like, oh, okay, he'll be out like a week, and then he'll be in there. It is now like more than 3 weeks since then, and now we're finally getting to see him actually run the first team offense in action. It just feels a little weird, but I have to say also, in seeing him playing, he doesn't look like a guy that's missed a whole lot of time. He's been very on time and accurate with a lot of things he's been doing.
No, and I mean, hey, that's when those 13 years of NFL experience kick in instances like this. But regardless, he's still a member of a new team. He's still learning a new offense that the rest of his offense is also learning alongside with him, which is definitely an interesting way to come into a new team, come into a new franchise. But, make no mistake before I say this, the Steelers have not changed their position on Russell Wilson. He is still in the quote unquote pole position. But you're right, as the days and days went on, and Russell Wilson was at first when training camp started in a ball cap and kind of just playing catch on the sidelines. And then as the days turned into weeks at Latrobe and Justin Fields was still getting the vast overwhelming majority of those reps with the ones, did you kind of start to think to yourself, is this becoming a little bit more of a competition than what people assumed at first? I think we are going to see the Steelers continue to really hone in to that pole position situation. They are going to continue to ride with Russ until he gives them a reason not to. But for a while there, especially considering the way Justin Fields has performed in camp, you maybe thought this was turning into a bit more of a competition than what the Steelers wanted it to be.
No, I agree. Like I've maintained, like, hey, this has always been Russell Wilson's job. Like, he has not lost QB1 yet. But as I've told people, and to some people's objections in our YouTube comment sections, because I see y'all, some people are like, oh, you're saying Justin Fields is the starter? You're just a Justin Homer. And I'm like,
oh, we can't be homers.
Right. And I'm just like, okay, first of all, I've always said, all I've said is he's narrowed the gap between them, because the gap between them, when we saw them in mini camp and training, and even like the first couple of days of training camp, was pretty wide. Like, Russell Wilson's a polished NFL quarterback who's won a Super Bowl, been in 9 Pro Bowls in 13 seasons. Like, he's been that. And Justin Fields, needs to get up to the level of being consistent in the NFL. That was his biggest challenge. And so, like, seeing all that, it's like, okay, but since then, he has been very consistent in training camp, and I'd say even consistent in the preseason game. He was pretty, outside of the botched snaps, which, again, maybe that was, Nate Herbig too, but all, like, with his decisions, with his playmaking, he has been there. And so I agree with you. I think that he's been pretty solid, and he's made the case closer. However, Russell Wilson, whenever he shows up, it's not like Russell Wilson's offbeat. It's not like he's off kilter and doesn't know where to go with the football. He's plugging and playing. Heck, he's running with the second team offense and, like, throwing it to them like it's no problem and being like, I can work with whoever you give me. And I think that's another sign of why they have so much faith in him to just be QB1, despite not really playing QB1 all the training camp.
And I think one of the things that is interesting when looking at the Russell Wilson, Justin Fields dichotomy we have right now, you're right. I mean, Justin Fields, in my opinion, and I've seen opinions that differ to this, in my opinion, has not usurped Russell Wilson for the starting job. But I think he's performed enough where if Russell Wilson starts to falter a little bit, the leash may be a little bit shorter on Russell Wilson than it was at the start of training camp. There may be a little bit more confidence among Steelers coaches to pull Wilson if it comes to that. It may never come to that. And it may, I believe in a situation where they find a way to incorporate Justin Fields a little bit while Russell Wilson remains the starting quarterback. I think that's something we could possibly see. But when you even look at joint practice today, it was funny when I was reading up on things after practice. I saw differing opinions from people who were at practice, people who cover the team day out, on which quarterback had the better day. I saw arguments that Justin Fields had the better day. I saw arguments that Russell Wilson was more efficient and had the better day. And it just goes to show you there really isn't a clear winner based on what's been done on the practice field specifically. And of course, part of that is because Russell Wilson hasn't been on the practice field as much as Justin Fields. But when you bring in these two quarterbacks, you bring in a guy like Justin Fields who hasn't had the most ideal start to his NFL career. He's kind of in a little bit of a prove-it situation. He's done what you've needed him to do in training camp. And as far as it's gone through 3 weeks in Latrobe and a little bit of the preseason, he's done exactly what Steelers coaches have asked of him, which is perform to the best of his ability, prove that he can be a possible viable option if the time comes.
Absolutely. I agree. I think that's the thing is that, at the start of camp, maybe they were a little nervous, like, if you got to go to Justin Fields, this could be an experiment here. But now I think it's like Justin Fields has to go in, no problem. Yeah, I think he can run the offense too. And I think that's where the Steelers are right now. And it's another sign for him here. I want to play this clip real here because one thing that happened in practice, we were recording this Thursday evening, so this happened earlier today as we were recording this. But one thing that happened earlier today was the Steelers ran their 2-minute drill with their second team offense, and it was against the Bills' second team defense. But in doing so, they Justin Fields dinked and dunked, made some smart throws, got down the field, and then they got to the 30-yard line, and the Bills' defense kind of ran with the entire play and just left him alone, and he just jogged. It's like he jogged for 30 yards. And like, listen, like normally in practice, like you're pulling up, not trying to hit the quarterback, but there wasn't someone within like 15 to 20 yards of him. And like, I think in real life, that would have been a touchdown. Like if that was live action football, he would have still gotten a touchdown on that play. And it speaks to his mobility that he has in this off and just his natural skills. And that's not something that I don't think he's overtly leaned on. I don't think he's dependent on, he hasn't used it as a crutch to get him out of trouble most of the time. And he even talked about after practice how, he's like, sometimes I intentionally hold on to the ball because we're trying to work with receivers. We're trying to work with DBs. We're trying to get certain matchups and see what certain things are. I think it's very good that he is mindful of that stuff. And I want to show you guys his response when I asked him about that and Mike Tomlin's response when I asked him about it. Here's both Justin Fields and then Mike Tomlin. We asked him after Steelers practice on Thursday.
With your mobility skills, is there any time when the coaches are like, hey, we'd rather you not do that as much and during certain drills, that they kind of just say, hey, do it how you feel it, play in and play out?
Nah, I mean, it's, play the game. Don't play the drill. So really, I think I've probably gotten, probably gotten influenced to use my legs more than I usually do in practice because sometimes we try to get the DBs work, receivers work when TJ might get in the backfield pretty quick. But I think you just got to find that balance to really play the game and stay in the pocket. You might be sacked already just to get the receivers and DBs working.
Mike, Justin said that you guys really have never dictated to him how much he should use his legs versus his arm in practice. How have you seen his decision making as far as when to take off and use his mobility?
I don't want to diminish his natural instincts. I've been really pleased with what I've seen in that regard. I think the 2-minute drill and what you saw today was reflective of that. What I don't want to do is take away a natural act. That guy's got some natural abilities in that area. It's our job to properly direct it and make sure that it's an asset to him and to us. That's the mentality that we all have. It's been good thus far. I'm not going to overmanage or micromanage it.
So I thought that was really good of Mike Tomlin, Shelby, because when I think back, I've seen him police it from like guys like Josh Dobbs. Because Josh Dobbs is also not on the level of Justin Fields, but times he would just completely rely on his legs. And he'd be like, Josh, stop it. We're trying to see certain things. I think it's great chemistry, the fact that Mike Tomlin never felt the want or need to police Justin Fields, and Justin Fields felt the want need to police himself, be like, hey, we need to see this for these reasons. I think that's a very good sign that his instincts are in the place that the Steelers want them to be to use his different skill sets.
And I think it's something that he could fall on too much. If he wanted to, he could, because I think we saw that numerous times from him in Chicago, where he just kind of felt like he was running for his life and trying to make something out of nothing. But, I'm watching that play develop during that 2-minute drill earlier today. And you're right. I mean, it was one of those situations where the seas parted. He had the ball, and I looked downfield and I thought, there can't be a defender within 15 yards of him. And it was more like a saunter into the end zone.
Yeah.
And you're not seeing plays open up like that hardly at all. But that's just one example of him being able to use his legs when it matters. And I don't see him doing that and forcing plays and just scrambling to make stuff happen otherwise in practice. So that's just one example of the way he can make things happen. It's going to be a threat that defenses are going to have to account for if he's in the game. Like I said, I don't know about you, Chris, but I envision a world where, Russell Wilson's QB1, but they draw something up for Justin Fields just because he's able to use his legs. I don't know your thought on that, but I foresee something like that just by the way he's able to make defenses move like that.
I actually think it could be before I was very much against it because I was thinking like, no, if they really see Justin Fields as QB2, they'll protect him so that they can always so that QB2 doesn't get hurt. But I think in the red zone, that is lethal. Like we even saw in 7 shots, they called a QB option, and it was just the guy who was like on the island of having to choose. Do I go with the running back or do I go with Justin Fields? He was just frozen, and Justin Fields just took the ball, and he was like, what you gonna do? Can't get to me. Like that's the kind of stuff that Justin Fields does to defenses that I think will be on the mind of defenders.
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, WNBA back soon, there's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. Is there any point in betting on anyone in the AFC West besides the Chiefs? FanDuel has the Chiefs -230 to win the AFC West. If you want to bet on another team in that division, the Chargers are the next closest to the Chiefs at +350. The Raiders, they're 9-1, and the Broncos, well, they're just happy to be here. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Some big news came out of Chargers training camp on Thursday, and it was nothing that happened on the field.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The boot is gone. That is where we have to start today's show, because although what we're going to be looking forward to most tomorrow is how these quarterbacks play still, we finally get the closest thing we're going to get to an update or good news revolving around Justin Herbert at this point, and that is as good of news as we could see. The Chargers put out a statement as soon as Justin Herbert injured his plantar fascia, which is not the same as plantar fasciitis. Again, two very, very similar things, not the same thing. They said it would be approximately 2 weeks he was in the walking boot. Thursday marked 2 weeks. So to see that, to have Jim Harbaugh out here saying that, he wasn't going to say anything, but also still kind of like Daniel Popper keeps asking, and some little things slip through the cracks sometimes, right? He says, when I saw it, I thought progress. And he also was saying that he's on track. And according to the Chargers themselves, on track means ready for week 1, which the implications of that, especially with 2 very winnable games to start your season, cannot be understated.
And they don't feel winnable at all if it's not Justin Herbert out there under center.
If it's Easton Stick, right? I mean,
exactly.
More specifically, yeah.
Yes, definitely, more specifically. But I think this is just what everybody wanted to see. Everybody wanted to see Justin Herbert out of that boot because that's what the Chargers gave us as expectations. They didn't give us much. They just said, hopefully, he's going to be out of the boot in 2 weeks and that he's going to start a gradual return to play. He's not going to play this weekend. He's not going to play at all in the preseason. He still has to ramp up. He still has to get back into practice. He's got to get comfortable. Yes, it's very important that he establishes some chemistry with the receivers, gets back in that rhythm. But this is the best news that we could have hoped for, is that Justin Herbert is on track to be ready to play when the games matter, and that starts with the Raiders week 1.
Yeah, and I think, most important to think about is from this Sunday, the day after the Chargers play, it's going to be 3 weeks before that first game. So no, he's out of the walking boot with 3 weeks to spare. Hopefully, he can get back even earlier, and I know the Chargers and Ben Herbert aren't going to rush him, so I trust that if he's back out there, he's been fully vetted and is fully ready to go without any, limitations.
Yeah.
Or how, they're obviously very comfortable with it, but maybe he even gets some time, right? Maybe he gets a little bit because it's going to be, 2 weeks after the last preseason game before they actually suit up for real the first time.
Yeah.
So maybe he can kind of mitigate some of the concerns that we had about the chemistry with those receivers and things like that, at least get some time in beforehand, but we'll see. But anyways, this is the biggest thing that could happen at this point of his recovery process. Now starts the ramp up period, and we'll see how quickly he can get back out there. But back to the game on Saturday against the Rams, it is still big, right? We're just still not 100% sure that Justin Herbert's going to play week 1, even though all signs are pointing in that direction. And the one thing that's kind of rooted itself out in a way because Justin Herbert's been out is the play of Easton Stick and how worthy he is to be the primary backup of Justin Herbert, who has only missed games 1 year, but now has had an injury in 3 consecutive seasons. That's been concerning. Is he the guy? Because this is the big thing for me, David. I think this is a last chance type of game because if he goes out there and looks like last week, I just don't know how you could possibly argue that he should be the primary backup for this team, whether or not Justin Herbert's out there in week 1, whether or not you're talking about him actually starting real NFL games. 1 out of 3 preseason games isn't enough for me. So to me, it feels like a last chance in that way.
It absolutely is a last chance. I'm completely on board with you. This game is going to be extremely important. A 5 for 13 for 31 yards is not going to cut it. That cannot happen in this football game for Easton Stick. I want to see him get some momentum going. I want to see him make some accurate throws. I want to see him go on some drives and sustain some drives. I'm talking 7, 8, 9, 10 play drives. Get the offense going. I want to see him be able to move the football. He should have the benefit of the offensive line, hopefully for the most part. Should have most of his weapons, starting wide receivers, his tight ends, his starting running backs are not going to play. Jim Harbaugh has already said that. Yeah. No J.K. Dobbins, no Gus Edwards there. But Easton Stick, this should be extremely important to him, and it needs to matter. And I want to see progression from week 1 to week 2 in the preseason because his job in the NFL, it might depend on it.
And the thing is now that I'm more comfortable with Justin Herbert starting in week 1, I don't think he has to go in there and be Justin Herbert and put up those type of numbers. It can't look like it did last week, right?
Yeah.
I don't need perfection. I just need much, much better.
Yeah.
And there is kind of a contingency plan that's happening as we speak. We do know that we should bring up, Jim Harbaugh did say Easton Stick was going to be the guy that starts this game, and he said that he would determine it based on who had the best practices this last week. And he says that's basically Easton Stick as Luis Perez follows him. But now the question is, how much will we see of Luis Perez? I'm thinking we'll see him significantly more than Max Duggan, significantly more than we saw him last week. At the same time, it's kind of a double-edged sword because you're going to get as many snaps as kind of, first down conversions and things like that you make, right? Because it's one of the reasons Easton Stick didn't have that many, snaps last week overall and why he stayed in the game so long is because he started with 6 straight 3-and-outs, right? That's only 18 plays on 6 different possessions. So it'll be kind of up to him. But for both of these guys, I think it's very important for the offense to also step up their game around these guys. I at least gave receivers a chance, which I really appreciated last week, and that's what you want. But the offensive line didn't give him or Easton Stick much of a chance.
No, they did not. And so, you want to see that natural progression for the offense from week 1 to week 2. You want to see the offensive line be able to protect the quarterback. You want to see them be able to open up some holes. You want to see, receivers getting open, and you want to see the quarterbacks hitting those receivers. Like, you just want to see, them be able to take the tape and the coaching points that they had in week 1, be able to correct them and be able to show progress in week 2. That is very, very important in this football game. That's what I'm going to be paying very close attention to.
Yeah, and I think there was just, some moments to really like from Luis Perez last week.
Yeah.
I mean, he did have the biggest offensive play last week. A lot of it besides that was running back checkdowns, so there wasn't much to take away, but he did look pretty poised. He looked pretty composed in the pocket and now has much more time under his belt comparatively since he got signed last week and was in a game only a couple of days later. So I liked the composure. I liked the fact that he was willing to take chances, and I think when you've seen what Easton Stick has been able to do, it does feel like there's a door open there, right? Like it does feel like he could close the gap with Easton Stick as far as who the backup quarterback is. And, both of them play really poorly. Then who knows? Maybe we see the Chargers kind of outsource that job and go look for it somewhere else in the free agent market. Or, like we talked about on yesterday's show, you trade for a Taylor Heineke or someone like that. But we still have more to get into because we are going to get to see Ladd McConkey for the first time. We were teased last week, but this week Jim Harbaugh says he expects Ladd McConkey to play, and he also expects Josh Palmer to play, which, like we said, Easton Stick should have his best receivers out there for this game. So no excuses this time around, but so excited to see what Ladd McConkey can do, and hopefully these quarterbacks can give him a chance to do something with it.
GameTime makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. GameTime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the GameTime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with GameTime. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast.
We're going to get into wide receiver tough decisions now. And starting right at the top, if you have an early pick in the first round, but Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb are already off the board, and you have to decide here what wide receiver you want to go with. Is it Jamar Chase or Amon-Ra St. Brown? I'm personally on the Amon-Ra St. Brown side. I believe you agree with me.
Yeah, I would say conventional wisdom would push you toward Chase. If you look at rankings, that's where Chase is at. I mean, right up there with Justin Jefferson, who's going as a consensus number 1. So we're not talking about him too much in this decision. Then it looks like it falls in line here with Lamb and Hill. So this is the first real decision I think you have. And I think when you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's still the top option on his team. They're still trying to figure out who's going to be the second wide receiver. We know Samuel Porta is really the second target on this team. And you have Jahmyr Gibbs coming up out of the backfield in the passing game. So pretty simple, straightforward breakdown. I mean, the Lions, there's no variables. You have the same quarterback. You have the same offense. You have the same role for Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's coming off a big year. The one thing that's different is he got paid. He got paid a ton of money, so he's going to be happy about that. That's not going to weigh him down at all. So, yeah, I think when you look at the volume, and he started to score touchdowns as well, like I think he's evolving as a receiver, where he's just not the slot option, but just an overall number 1 and dominating everywhere on the field. So I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. I also think there's going to be a big drop-off in targets to other wide receivers, where we know with Jamar Chase, you've got T. Higgins, and T. Higgins is going to cut into some of his production at some point. I get Tyler Boyd's not there, but they're going to find other guys to spread the ball around to. So I think because the presence is a clear number one receiver, I'm going St. Brown over Chase, where I think Higgins is going to be a bigger factor than we would like.
Yeah, I don't think there's a bad choice here. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown will be a lot more consistent from week to week. And then also, like last year, he averaged 17 points per game in half PPR. That's more points per game than Jamar Chase has ever averaged in a season. Even in his year, he had 1,455 yards and 13 touchdowns. He averaged 15 and a half fantasy points per game. And again, Amon-Ra was at 17 last year. So I think he's going to be more consistent, and he clearly has already shown that he can put up more points than Jamar Chase. And I also was going to bring up, I was looking at his home road splits because I was like, for some reason I had it in my head, well, because Jared Goff stinks away, then we have to be worried about playing Amon-Ra St. Brown on the road. That actually wasn't the case at all last year. He averaged more points on the road last year. He averaged 17.2 fantasy points per game on the road last year, 16.6 at home. So it was a very even split between home and away. So just because Jared Goff stunk, it didn't hurt Amon-Ra St. Brown for fantasy last year on the road. So I thought that was really nice to see. And because of that, I just going with Amon-Ra St. Brown early. Now, later on, either in the end of the first round, early second round, you're going to have to make this decision if you're looking for a wide receiver. It's Garrett Wilson, who gets Aaron Rodgers, or Marvin Harrison Jr. as a rookie going this early in drafts. Which side are you on? Because we have a different opinion on this one.
Yeah, this one was really tough. I tried to examine everything that I could. I mean, Aaron Rodgers' health is a little bit of a variable. We know that, but at least he has Tyrod Taylor to lean on instead of a mess of quarterbacks. If that were the case, I think that makes me feel better about Garrett Wilson in general, that there's a much better backup situation, but I expect Rodgers to be on the field. Now, the chemistry with Rodgers has been well documented. They've been a little off. They've been upset with each other at times here in practices that they're just not on the same page. Part of it is that Rodgers has missed a lot of time. In the early offseason, he chose not to be there, even while he was rehabbing and trying to get a connection with Wilson and the other receivers. But Wilson also is a clear number one here. Mike Williams, they're hopeful, but not sure that he's going to be ready for week one. Again, we talk about some other weapons they have. Xavier Gibson, Malachi Corley, those type of players, but there's still a long way to go before any of them are consistent contributors. And I think just like I like Breece Hall being the primary here, I think a lot of this offense is going to be Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. Really a ton of it, because Aaron Rodgers has to trust his target. He wants to trust Wilson all over the field. He needs to kind of find rapport with other guys he can trust for big plays. Williams has not been around either. So I do like Rodgers with Wilson. I don't necessarily think there's going to be too much there that we're going to be disappointed in, because I love how Garrett Wilson also runs routes in the red zone. He has a one play where he makes a move. He can catch fades, a little bit of a throwback to the Jordy Nelson route that Aaron Rodgers had back in Green Bay, the back shoulder throws. Wilson can score in a prolific sense here, and I do like him all over the field. He's just so dynamic. And we saw, even if he had halfway decent quarterback play, he went off last year. Unfortunately, he didn't get very much of it at all. So I'm excited for him. And Rodgers slightly over Kyler Murray in this connection with an Ohio State receiver.
So I'm going with Marvin Harrison Jr. And both are very talented players. Like, I think Garrett Wilson's a very talented player, but Marvin Harrison Jr., I think, can be on the level. Like, if he hits his ceiling and what we think he can be, I think he can be on that level of a Justin Jefferson talent level. Well, Wilson, I do think, is a tier below that, even if he does get good quarterback play. Also, both should be hyper targeted in their offenses. So that's great. It really comes down to that I trust Kyler Murray in his prime, a year removed from the ACL tear, more than Aaron Rodgers, who's 40 years old on a new team coming off an Achilles tear. That's really what it comes down to. We saw Wilson last year have the fourth most targets in the league at 168 targets, but was still wide receiver 40 in fantasy points per game in half PPR leagues. Yes, Aaron Rodgers should make that different, right? Like, I don't think if he gets that many targets with Aaron Rodgers, it's going to be close to that bad. But also at the same time, Aaron Rodgers has been incredibly bad under pressure since 2021. Actually, the only quarterback that's had a worse completion percentage than Aaron Rodgers under pressure was Zach Wilson, the guy he's replacing. Like, it's been incredibly bad for Rodgers when he's been pressured over the last few years. And the Jets' offensive line stunk last year. They did try to fix it this year. We'll see if it's fixed, right? It's not easy just to overhaul an offensive line and have them gel. Those are all my worries. I think Garrett Wilson will be a fine fantasy asset, but I just feel somehow I feel better, and I feel like it's less risky to take a shot on the rookie Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, I mean, Garrett Wilson would be the example of a post-hype sleeper that can turn into a stud here. Sleeper in relation to the rest of the wide receiver ones. I think he's that talented, so I'm going with the more seasoned talent here with Garrett Wilson. That's it. I mean, Marvin Harrison could make waves here really quickly, but he does have to share a little bit with Trey McBride. I think the Cardinals' offense overall will be a little bit more diverse than the Jets. And the Jets, sometimes you want it to run through two players a ton, like we've seen, obviously, with the Chiefs back in their best days. I mean, they had Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and made it work with those two guys. You don't mind just being two guys, a very compacted offense. And that's what I think you get here with Wilson. I mean, I love Harrison as well. It's going to be a tough decision. That's why we break it down for you. But yeah, I think as it develops, it could go either way as we keep that in our head. But eventually we're going to have to make a call. And I think I would lean a little bit more to Wilson because I think he has the same type of upside with a little bit